Good morning, Kathryn.
Good morning.
When did you first realize that you were a poet?
Um, well, my skills had to catch up a little bit with my longings, but I think I realized I was kind of a dreamer and that I related to the world that way really young, 4, 5,
Wow.
I think so. But somebody told me something interesting that if you find a picture of yourself when you were a child, that you most love, that is the one that shows your character the most. And I do have a picture in mind, I don't have it here, that suggests that at 8 I probably knew I was going to be doing this. That was my 8th birthday picture. So I'd say then.
When did you start writing poetry?
About 8. But I just wrote, love letters to my mother and things like that. But then the first big poem I wrote was like a 4-page thing about Greece, of all things, about a boy and a girl in wartime Greece. And it's in quatrains, it rhymes, of course, all the way down. And it goes on, it's very sad about the little boy getting shot by a soldier. So it's got a kind of melodramatic wartime concern for another country. And it turns out to be Greece, which is odd for me.
And do you have any nicknames?
Me?
Yes.
I don't. I never did as a girl. I guess I could say that since I started the Readers of Homer, my clever daughter Laura nicknamed me Founder, which seemed like an unlikely nickname, but everybody picked up on it. So all kinds of people call me Founder, or in the vernacular, Foundy. Laura calls me Foundy.
And that kind of represents
It represents the work on the Homer that I've done.
so that you're kind of a foundational.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
All right. Well, are you ready to start reciting some of your
Well,
poems?
I am, and I want to thank you, Lisa. This is a birthday present. This recording is a birthday present for my 90th birthday, and I thank you a lot for that. I think I'll dedicate this reading to my husband because it's his birthday. Even though he's gone, August 23rd is his birthday, so here's for you, Hans. I'm reading 15 poems, and they are across the whole spectrum of my life, really. Well, not back to 8. I'm not back to 12. Probably the earliest one here is in my 30s. The majority are a bit later, but I'm not going to identify decade or condition or anything in reading the poems. They're all sort of one effort. Not present enough. We are never present enough. Streetcar, firefly, bed, what we said and where we said it, what we thought and did not say. Nocturne, apricot, or kiss. Why we did not feel it deeply, why we had better things to do. Tulip, shoulders, smiles, where our minds were wandering, where good intentions failed. Twilight, robin, pillow, sage, what we did and where we did it, what we meant and did not mean, when we live and how we live it, when we die and how we die. Pretty much connected with that theme is a poem called The Shape of Joy, thematically. Once knowing that the days would come to end, they took the shape of joy, and all the patient beauty which we postponed from day to day stood shivering and bare. And there it was, the glory of the time that we had lost. I cupped my hands, a gesture to recapture that sad day. The seagulls are like fragments of a flag battering the masts of limping ships. The stones, a million times renewed, are burnished with a glittering gray. The sheep, simple and bland, surprised us in December fog. Bronze fern, sowing of pines, and the filigreed nudeness of trees. Glens, where oak leaves still cling to the gilt and arabesques of fall. Heron and plover and dolphin sometimes, and cormorant bent in a lean black bow, crashing down in his dive, all so lovely. I cup my hands. I try to clap all instants into one, waiting to believe and saving praises for another day, waiting for the beauty that I grieve because I did not love it in its day. I think these are maybe more thematically connected than I realized. This is an evidence of my playing around with a formal verse scheme, the Villanelle, well-known ancient verse form. And I'm titling it, it's on box air from suite number 3, which is very, very gorgeous. This truth is strange. We are not what we are. Most of the time we barely even care if we rise slightly, silent as a star. That weekend you were tinkering with the car, I turned and saw your face shine and your hair. The truth is strange. We are not what we are. We merchandise our poisons, eat at tar. Despite our weak, our scared, our stuttering prayer, we can rise lightly, silent as a star. We think we cannot love except from far across the sterile distances we share. This truth is strange. We are not what we are. Fear is the tearing greed that begets war. We kill our gracious world, yet anywhere we still rise quietly, silent as a star. Clarity becomes us, even in the dark, and sends a comfort through the holy air. This truth is strange. We are not what we are, but do rise brightly, silent as a star. Then I began, because I had to teach Homer in humanities courses at Ohio State University and had never read him, I started reading and teaching and loving Homer and stayed with that the rest of my life, up to the point where I was called founder of the Readers of Homer. This is a poem not so much about Homer, but about my father's dying. But it's called The Old Men in Homer. The old men in Homer are beached up like bulky sea otters when bereft of their hero sons, when stranded amid their possessions. Concubines comprehend their own abducted futures when someone's victory is told. And we, at our Protestant funerals, who grieve nonetheless like the ancients, unwittingly witness our prominence on the edge of all absence. My father is dying, my children, and your father is already dead. Hold my hand, for my bedroom is darkened and my staircase is scary with noises. Tuck me in, tell me stories, cool my fever, for I am little and you are learned. You think I'm the grown-up and know things? No. All I know is my father is dying and the sun stares in slits through my fingers. And you, Father, internal, abandoned, how is it inside the exhaustion? Under ceilings of chemotherapy, do you wander, a lost little brother? Are crickets there at twilight? Are you patriarch, husband, sailor, or child? My dear young fatherless three, so resilient in the taut skin of youth, you will not understand my lament, nor how I now feel I'm your sister, half aware at the graves of our fathers, half mature to the raw law of dying. You will not understand the nearness of death's face until my own death slams it into place. And this is a kind of travel poem, but it's also about the death of my father. And it is, I traveled a great deal, and I love traveling in Mexico, and this is a poem about that. It is called Refusing to Look. Agile as this kid selling chiclets, I dart in and out of my terrors. That beggar wants my espresso, or what weighs down my tourist purse. He is not death, though he is curved like the sickle of death. He is like poverty that must stare at black toenails forever. I suppose I could tell you of his sombrero, his rags, the limp cap of his frail, withered hand. But the point is, I never quite saw him. His appeal to my careful resistance pierced me only obliquely. Now I think he's my father, attending from whichever side death is, waiting to be acknowledged, fed. His peripheral departure brings on tears. I wrote so many travel poems I swore I'd never write anymore. This is a poem which I read now, which is, I don't know when it's from, maybe my 50s, early 50s. And it's about a quote from William Butler Yeats. It has to do with Homer. It has to do with depression. It's the only depressed poem I'm going to read. I have quite a few, but it is the only one that I want to read. And its title is Yeats Said. Clinging to mother's fond conviction of her daughter's inviolate beauty, to pool edge all of the luminous shadows and habitual way with the mirror, to the dear dispositions of one beloved body. For out there the water changes. What drops off is just the beginning. If we could see from above, we would know how a great shoal rips are only a turquoise selvage of a black and unrippable fabric, whose warp has 15 dimensions that weave where no light spins. Blacker than my black heart, when I cherish my own extinction, is that playground of old dream fears. Going under is just the beginning. Achilles is microscopic, weeping on the sand. Dido, alone again, cries out through the ghost halls of Carthage. And Yeats said even Homer might be mad as the wind and the snow. Don't do this. Make a list. Think of money. Don't do this. Make a list. Think of money. Okay, poetry has helped me a lot, both in teaching it, in writing it, and I do think about the craft and the art a lot. I love what poetry can do for us. I don't mean my poetry, I mean the effort of the poetic impulse in the world in general. I think it's a balancer and a great help. And so I've written a lot of poems about the craft, about the art, as Dylan Thomas says, calls it in my craft or sullen art. And so these are two poems and a little addendum about writing, just about writing. The stirring of a poem. The stirring of a poem is very delicate. It's hard to discern and solitary. It is there, sitting on a hill wet from a leaving winter, muddy and smelling muddy, where thin, hard petals force themselves up through dark, matted leaves. And why is it bothering? Why do things bother to want to bloom, to need to? Why complicate themselves into bundled, curl-tight eventualities? These templates, patterns, miniature patterns, and intimate templates of the yet to be. Destiny is mulched being. There we are, swamped by a fecundity that smells half rotten, half rose. And the little poem turns over in darkness, moving possibly towards whatever light there is, or maybe. The second one is similar theme. Dear poem, I thank you for your insouciance, your weird, unnerving aptitude to say the unprepared for. You're the best thing in my life. And though I walk right past you, and though I vacuum past you, you have my real respect. I know you don't believe this, scattered as you are in notebooks, abandoned among the bills. But you're what I think of when dreaming. You stand there without expression, patient and never the same. You're indifferent if I feel trespassed, and you endure me if I'm scared. You are like the tree, the giant elm, equivalent to my skyline, that I needed back then as a child to lean my forehead against, calmed by its cellular truth. And then the little extra poems I want to just throw in are little nighttime poems that I wrote over my life. First, the poem tried to reach me. It waited once, all night. I'm hard to get. Second one. The poetry inside you is a chalice, and it's golden. And the third little one. Ah, poetry. What else can chart the loss, the anvil, and the thread? The hover of the great wing span. So those are just a few of my poems about poetry. Now I'm going to read here a two-part exercise, you might say, about a Cro-Magnon young woman whom I almost feel I know. I've named her Zim. The first part is prose, second part is a poem. Zim lives in a cave with her tribe, but she's a bit different. She is more quiet and more observant than many of her tribe, and they rather fear her and do not understand her terribly well. I think of her as a kind of proto-artist of time immemorial. She sings, and this is about her. The voice in this work is the voice of memory, known to the Greeks as Mnemosyne, who is the mother of the muses. She has access to all memory, which is kind of enormous, and she has access to Zim's memory. Zim feels weak today, and something resembling sadness has deepened her wrinkles, though she has only a few beginning ones. Singing almost always heartens her and gives her courage, though she does not yet have any concept of the word courage. Her tribe live and die. The men drive the fiercest animals away from the cave entrance, and they share the task of carrying fire. Most often, it is Ohuyu who's vigilant about keeping the flame going. Zim is lamenting. I wonder what it is. I have no access to her thoughts unless she wishes to remember something. Her lament grows louder and more rhythmical, and it has a dark falling pulse to it, a dark falling sound. Some of the others do appreciate this, I can tell. The more she grieves, the more intense the rhythm becomes. And now she's counting out the emphases on her finger. She counts out ah, 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 ah. Over and over, she touches the two end bones of her finger. As her lament slips into a softer ah, she alters the sounds, and I feel sure that alters the meanings. Ka, we. Ka, we. As she sings these new sounds, I hear a subtle difference. Oh dear Zim, I wonder why it is that I need to think of you more than of Dida or Unit or one of your many cousins. I'm drawn to you and your expressions. Is it because you sing in that crystalline voice? Or because you love to stand quietly at the cave entrance and watch the rain fall? Or is it because you make small clay figures from river mud to honor the dead? Or maybe it's because you teach the children how to count the duck's eggs. Even if you do not have a word for courage, you exemplify it. You are very brave, suckling your fourth infant there, warming slightly the cold rock you're leaning against, and singing at the same time. Part 2, Zim, called In Deep Time. In deep time, In deep time, I hear a mother singing to the crying baby cradled in her arms. Hollow as an oboe, hollow as a cave, her open mouth a cavern of a given tenderness. She sits in a shadowed corner. I cannot see her face. Over the dry savanna, over the dreaded forest, the precious vowels, oh and ah, float on the easy air. We know that this is true, for love preceded language, song preceded statement, grief preceded tools, and wonder preceded prophet. In deep time, I hear a mother singing to the sleeping child, now curled in her arms. I have a whole lot of things about Zim. These next two poems are kind of, I don't know what they are. They're lighter and, in a way, sillier. To St. Thomas Aquinas, great medieval scholastic theologian, famous for the unanswerable question of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. To St. Thomas Aquinas, the answer to the question of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin is 731. On the outer rim, 500 angels line dance the hora, or the miserlou, with their wings packed each to the other, like monarchs who've flown from Canada to reside tightly in Mexico. They never stop, nor do those in the next big circle, composed of 200 angels. They move in the other direction and have more space between them. Then there's the circle of 30 who dance like Isadora, their wings and footsteps close, and they dance with great abandon. In the center is the prima ballerina, pirouetting ecstatically. She can spread her transparent wings over the whole ensemble. Sometimes I think she's waving to me, but it's just a formal position. A pious rabbi in Padua once thought there were 231, but he's to be forgiven. It was only the 14th century, and he was always needing new lenses. He could not see the turning whir of the angels dancing on the rim. He thought it was just the shape of the pin gleaming and glistening in sparkles. But now we have fiber optics and can witness the tiniest angle. Silly. This is about something that happened, fairly recent poem, in my driveway. I wonder if I could convince you that a snail's tracks made me think of Bach's well-tempered clavichord. Would you believe me when I assert that they weren't there last night, but completely there this morning? That the little smear steps were stitched across the highway as if a consummate seamstress had put them precisely there. So good she could sew on concrete. Their steady, even purpose left a trail of clarity, even of meaningfulness, in their pearly, translucent intentions. Tiny, perfect triangles seemed like pure lucidity. Bach is gone, the snail is gone, and we never spoke or met. But I marvel at the application of miniature perfection, one after the other, evenly spaced like beads on a string, particulates in a wave. I don't know where they would take us, these undulating patterns, but I'm sure that they're not forlorn, nor do they seem like nothing. They go where I can't follow, precise, inscribed notations. Oh, rosaries of joy underneath the engine, and each one has a certitude like faith. This is a poem to my first daughter, my middle child, Andrea. Are you an angel, my darling? That's the title. Are you a ghost, my darling? And if so, do you hover around me? Are you tranquil or disturbed? There is so much I would ask you if only we could talk. We used to talk all night. Do you feel or think in any of the ways that I could understand? When I cry for you, do you vanish or dissolve into my tears? Your little daughter described you as being, quote, several shades of clear. Do you know if that's correct? She saw you in the bedroom. And if you are now pure spirit, will I be able to find you? Do pure spirits find one another? I have no photos of you, at least none not in my mind. They would only assure your absence and its presence that I'm after. If you are a ghost, my pretty one, you might look like the rain that is falling, or the rain that someday will fall. Are ghosts the same as angels, and angels the same as ghosts? Are you ghost, or angel, or air, or none of the above? I cannot believe I will join you. I fear you'll remain away. Walt Whitman is still in love with me, and I return his love. But he loves you too, and your children, and even their children beyond. He thinks we all are beautiful. He loves to hear us speak. He says we have beautiful voices, a soft, poetic speech. He knows that inside we are artists, American and deep. Physically, we're splendid, outlined against the water. We're kind to our baby brothers and consider the harlot our friend. How he does this is way beyond me, but I try to believe in him. I want him to be happy. This next poem is the ending poem, number 16, of a 16-poem sequence and chapbook called The Orchard. In my late 50s or maybe 60s, I guess it was 60s, I found a walnut orchard along the Sacramento River, very huge, very old. It was planted in the same year I was born, 1930. And I used to take my dog out there to run. And I wrote these, I went many times. No one was ever there, but it was perfectly tended. And I wrote these 16 poems, all of them called The Orchard. This is the last number 16. Orchard 16. Almost lost in circumference, I need to rejoin the world. I gravitate outwards towards the binding stripe of mustard, a sizzling yellow edge that starts where the orchard ends. It's a surrounding brilliance that plays havoc with location. It is red-winged blackbird heaven, but it makes my life feel dizzy. Concentric thinking wants me, and I love the shield, the circle. Still, in brightness, I lurch out to the riddle of linear time, to the 70-year-old child, the 7-year-old crone. Women's voices drift like pollen. They call back and forth like starlings, glossy and flushed out of hiding. I embrace myself like a basket piled high with available blessings. The title of my collected poems will be The Little Chapel in Donegal. And that's the title of this poem. The little chapel in Donegal sits by a small dirt road. It's misty, it's rainy. The chapel can hold maybe 10 wet people. It takes just one candle to light it. The warm vowels rise. I love this little chapel, and I think now that it's me, and has been all along. Together, we sit by a small dirt road on a slope way out in Donegal. And then I'm going to end with one of these poems that come to me at night. They're pure gift, but this I think says quite a bit. This is only about a month old. It's a little coda to everything. Poem comes to me, I don't get up, I don't write it down until I memorize it, and then I write it down in the morning. Has no title. The promise of more distorts us. The premise of being eludes us. And how are we to wade these mirrors? Thank you.